PXG has done it again with the launch of a new lineup of drivers, fairways, hybrids, and irons. The new Gen 5 golf clubs deliver significantly increased MOI, faster ball speeds, longer distances, and tighter dispersions, all coupled with the exceptional feel and sound golfers have come to expect from PXG. Schedule your custom fitting or buy online at pxg.com.
And we're back, Stripe Show podcast on a Monday. I'm your host, Travis Fulton. Thank you for making us part of your day. We have got a fun one here today. Actually, first off, before I bring my guest in, and those watching on video, you can see Martin here. But thank you to the audience here. We're off to a great start. First 2 weeks, numbers are up, audio and video. We appreciate you you being here. We've got a full slate for you here this week. I'll be heading out to Palm Springs for the American Express Championship this week, which I'm excited about. But we've got you covered. Full slate. Best players in the world, analysts, teachers, and today, the man, the longest driver in the world, joins me from Germany. I'm keeping him up for the podcast. Martin Borgmeier. How you doing, man?
Hey, how are you? I mean, it's 5 o'clock. It's still okay. I have a couple more hours today.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. All right.
Yeah.
So you're still up. You probably still got some more training to do. Let me ask you this to kick this thing off. I mean, what does a day look like for you, Martin, when you are in full train mode? You're trying to obviously to get your body to do what you want it to do, but build up to a championship that's coming up, say a couple weeks away. Just give my audience a feel for what a day looks like for you in training for a World Long Drive.
It's very different and depends on if I'm actually trying to condition myself for the World Championship or if it's winter, just like right now. Like right now, I'm working a lot on my technique, on mechanics too, because you always get a little sloppy with certain moves. So I'm always trying to do a lot of swing maintenance. Like that's the first bit. But the real interesting stuff, well, it starts, I would say, 6 weeks prior to the World Championship, because the big deal with the World Championship is we're playing over 4 days. And the most important day, obviously, is the last one. So you're already hitting 3 days straight, and then you have to be your fastest. So the conditioning for me, so this year, which was very successful, was I was hitting 4 days in a row, 60 balls on the first day, 62nd, 63rd. And then the fourth day, it was all out. I was hitting way over 300 golf balls. So I was just trying to stretch my day with like lunch in between and everything, not consecutive balls without a break. But I was hitting a lot of golf balls just to make sure that I'm conditioning myself for that last day and to amp up that speed in the very last bit, because that's the most important one, right? It's like the semi-final, the final, that's when it really matters. And the more you do it, and I did it 6 weeks straight, on a 4 day on, 2 days off basis, the more you do this and the more comfortable you get actually going faster on day 4 towards the end of this cycle, the more likely it is that you do well in the tournament as well, not only because of the conditioning, but also because of the mental aspect, because you've done it before.
Well, and you're looking at the champion from 2022, Long Drive World Champ. And that had to, what was the longest drive that week for you with the highest speed? Share that with my audience.
Honestly, I think it was 426 in the finals. 426 with 225 ball speed. And the longest one I hit in competition last year in 2022 was 484 in Denver. That was, I mean, it was high altitude, right? It was not downwind. It was like more across, maybe a little bit downwind. But it's interesting because in those conditions, well, speed is great, but actually way more important is all the launch conditions. And when you're in Denver, you got to spin it right. Right, meaning way more. So spin rates around 3,000 were actually perfect that day. And we had a bit of release down there as well. Josh Koch hit the longest ball of that day, and it was 496. So we're trying to scratch that 500-yard mark.
Wow. It's coming, right? I mean, 500, it's gonna happen.
Oh,
have
100%.
you had it in non-competition?
Oh, I don't really know. Yes, I had it just like the day before yesterday on my simulator, right? I was hitting golf balls in Paris and I was hitting balls on the concrete, so it rolled out. So, I mean, it's not real, but what I'm saying with that is it all depends on the conditions. So we're desperately waiting for that perfect day with like high altitude, downwind, a rolling grid, and then we're not playing like 420 something, 425. We're hitting like 520 something. That would be cool, but well, it's all about the conditions.
We're going to get to your relationship with Bryson here in a second. And I've got some videos here to even talk about some technique, because I think it's interesting in the way that you guys go about getting speed. I do think that the impact in the instruction world, which is primarily my craft, it's had a very positive impact. Now, I'm not saying that I'm trying to get my students to swing as hard as you, but I am saying that I'm trying to get them to recruit and lengthen out using a lot of the same techniques that you do. And we'll get into that here in a second. I'm really curious to get your thoughts on it. But before we get to that, do you watch a lot of pro golf? Like PGA Tour was in Hawaii the last 2 weeks. John Rahm wins, then Siwoo Kim wins yesterday at Sony. Now they're going over to Palm Springs. Do you watch a lot of pro golf? And if so, is there a player or two that you're like, man, I'd like to get my hands on that guy and show him how to hit it harder?
Well, there's a few out there, right? But they're all pretty much, I mean, when they make it to TV, they probably pretty much do a great job in their craft. But I see a lot of people actually utilizing exactly what you just said. And it's not only the big bombers. And that's very interesting because the principles are very much the same. And when I look at, for example, Francesco Molinari, I have a video coming out with him that I filmed a couple weeks ago. And he's been so slow. I mean, unreal slow. Like in 2018, he was like bottom bracket of driving distance and speed and everything. And then he was working on some principles with his coach, and his coach was actually influenced by my coach, Lee Cox, to work on some of the long drive moves. Well, obviously he's not doing them as extreme as we do, but he implemented some of them to some extent, and he made it from bottom of the bracket to like middle of the pack, just above average. So that shows that, well, everybody's talking about the big bombers like Bryson and John Rahm and DJ and all these guys, that sometimes are like 190 plus ball speed, Cameron Champ and others. But these principles do not only apply to them. They most of the time, they apply a lot of them in a very good way to make them feasible for the golf course. But you can do the same stuff with an 82-year-old guy that I had in my studio, for example, and give him 10 miles an hour in no time, because he's just not utilizing his body correctly. He's just not tapping into any of the power elements. And when you make someone a little more athletic in the golf swing and, well, change those feet from like super rooted to moving a little bit, you see speed games in very quickly.
I've always said, like, Finau hits it a long ways. Like, he creates a lot of speed. And sometimes I'll joke with his coach, Boyd Summerhays. I'm like, man, just tell that dude to wind up, take it back. I want the club pass parallel, and that's how, and hit it, and because, he's so short, and of course he can control it from there, and he creates great speed from there. But I think Finau could be the longest on tour if he really wanted to be. I just think
100%. Yeah, I agree with you. We've all seen the videos, right? Yeah. When he was like 206, all of a sudden when he was taking it back longer. But at the same time, with his speed right now, I would guess he's like high 70s, low 80s, something like that. When he's going after it, maybe mid 80s with the same swing. It's enough for him. It's enough. And I still believe you can probably drive it into places that most people can't reach, and he can do it with his technique right now that he feels comfortable with. And that's great. But at the same time, he might use some of those training principles with a little bit exaggerated technique to either maintain his speed or gain a little bit of speed. So the principles still apply. And yes, when he takes it back longer, the longer the hand path gets, the more potential you have for more speed, because you have more distance of the hand path on the way down to create speed and more time. But well, he found his way to utilize it, and he's fast enough. If he would be like 150 with his current swing, I would be like, well, I mean, one, we probably wouldn't know him. That's the first bit. But the second bit is then I might want to encourage him to swing a little bit longer.
Yeah, there's play speed. That's just it, right? Like these guys
Exactly.
have to have a play speed. They may try to like incorporate. They may try to chip away at the governor, lengthen it out, and incrementally do it, but they have to feel okay. This is my play speed. I feel like I know where it's going to go. And unlike, in all due respect, in the long drive, like you guys are trying. You can hit a few more foul balls, right? Where
Oh yeah.
where for them a foul ball is they're going to miss the cut quickly if they start getting it to go the wrong way. We'll get to Bryson here now. I want to pop this in here. This is a video that you posted, someone that you spent a lot of time with. Bryson gives you a lot of credit for what he's learned in creating more speed. And of course, Bryson is not on the PGA Tour. He's part of Live Golf now. But when he was on the PGA Tour and he went down this path in creating more speed, when you look at the result, nobody can argue that as Bryson got longer, the net result was better for his game, right? I mean, he wins the U.S. Open. He started doing things that really nobody's ever seen before on the PGA Tour. And a lot goes into that, from his body to the way that he trains. Just talk a little bit about your relationship with Bryson and maybe what he's meant to your industry, the world long drive.
Everything is the short answer. Everything. It changed everything. And most people don't remember that Bryson a couple years ago was 170 miles an hour ball speed. 170. Right now he can pump it up to like 215, 220.
Wow.
And I've never seen a ball speed increase from raw 170 plus 50 to 220. I don't think anyone has ever done it before, nor even like won or touched a world championship or done well on any tour. So it is so unique and so special what he's been doing. And well, now when you get to know Bryson, it's kind of interesting how all that started off. So it was the COVID break, and like long drive didn't do very well. Everything was canceled. Like, and he was starting to experiment and work on the speed. And he was influenced by everything that he saw from World Long Drive back in the days on TV, and saw Kyle Berkshire win and was like, hey, if I only had a little bit of this speed, just a tad, right? I would be so much better out on course. So when you know Bryson, he's like, when he's onto something, he's going all in and down the rabbit hole, like all the way. He's like he wants to find out everything about it. So give him a topic and he'll find out everything with the right motivation. Like the same happened with all the fitness stuff, and now he's going down the nutrition road and like all that, and he's trying to find all these pieces and puzzle them together. And when all that started with long drive, he got to a point fairly quickly, because he was doing it so extreme and like every day, that he tapped into all these power sources and very quickly was over 200 ball speed, which is insane already. Like I don't think a lot of people could do that. And him from being the average tour guy, the mad scientist, the not very known for driving distance guy, to like a runner-up at the World Championship is absolutely crazy. And yeah, so mindset-wise, it was very interesting, because during that COVID period, he reached out to me at some point, like reacting to my Instagram story. And at that point, I had like, 5,000 followers, right? Just started, did fairly well in Europe, but nobody cared really, right? I was on a TV show in Germany, but nobody was really interested in my golf stuff, right? Nobody really cared. And all of a sudden, I saw a follow from Bryson DeChambeau, because I still kept track of all my followers, like my new followers every day, because there was not that many following every day, like new ones.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like a couple minutes later, he reacted to my story. I hit a 3-wood 205 miles an hour like that day. I still remember. I was really pumping it. I was trying to go speed train, but at the same time, with a small head, was trying to work on strike location. So he reacted like hell yeah, or something like that. It's some reaction, and I was like, what is going on? Right? I was probably screaming for the next 2 hours, and then I try to keep it like low key and answer like whatever, yeah, pretty good, or something like that. And then by that happening, it very quickly turned into a very geeky conversation about shafts and speed training and technique mechanics and like all that stuff that I was working on on a daily basis, and exchange numbers. And very quickly we were on WhatsApp because he's not an iPhone guy anyways. Kind of interesting. His texts are green, right? So and overseas here in Europe and Germany, WhatsApp is the big deal. So we were hopping on WhatsApp very quickly and just went back and forth with stuff. And that was so funny because then finally at that point I couldn't go to the US because your borders were still shut. And then at some point when I could travel and actually compete, and he saw my Instagram story that I was in the US, he was like, yeah, come over to Dallas so we can hang out for a couple of days. And went there. And very quickly, as soon as we started working together, started like practicing together and all that stuff, very quickly I forgot about that he's actually pretty good at golf. It's like the relationship just grew, and he turned into a very good friend. And like every now and then when we're doing stuff together, I remember like, oh yeah, right, you can chip and putt too. It's actually pretty good. So it got to a basis that it was just normal to talk about all this stuff, just like good friends do. So it's when I think back how all that started, it's absolutely unreal. And now, I mean, we're together in the finals of the World Championship of Long Drive. I mean, write that story.
Yeah, that was impressive too. I mean, from a long drive standpoint, here's Bryson climbing, like you said, go down this rabbit hole. I know his coach, Chris Comowell, who was on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and this obsessive mind going down that rabbit hole and just owning it and making it happen. It's a cool story, and there's no question. Bryson's such a polarizing figure, just in professional sports. And selfishly, I was disappointed to see him go to live because I love the PGA Tour and wanted him to see how he could stack up to that history for years to come, and of course it's a different climate. It's a different world now. And there's another competitor in the room, if you will, and he decided to go over there. Now I want to get to Greg Rose for a second, because you and I, and the other thing real quick, your coach, Lee, years ago, I worked on Golf Channel for quite some time. And when they had the long drive, they owned it and they were telecasting it. We would have some segments, and I asked Lee to come on and talk about it. I think that was the first time he actually did Golf Channel at the time. And it was great because here's a guy that just lives in this world of speed, right? And getting him to articulate how you all trained and how it's a business and the whole bit. I think that was a really cool moment for golf. And not only what you all were doing, and it still is, but at that point in time, it was really coming front and circle here in the United States because of Golf Channel. And Lee came on and talked about it, and we've exchanged DMs every once in a while to this point. But yeah, what a mind that guy is. I mean, I think I could listen to that dude talk literally for like hours. I could just listen to him talk. Just keep talking. I just want to just keep absorbing, what you're putting down. But I had Dr. Greg Rose on I had him on last Thursday, and we were talking about a number of topics. One of them was Will Zalatoris in this side bend, and because he's helping Will. Another one was change of knee flex and how the pelvis moves and how Jason Day's trying to take pressure off his back. Another one was speed. And he had a lot to say about speed. And then you jumped on there and said, man, I disagree with this. Mm-hmm. So share with my audience just kind of what Greg had to say and kind of where you come down on this speed creation and sustaining it. And then I think you said something earlier, which I thought was fascinating, in getting it to peak the last day.
Yeah. So speed training in general is such an interesting topic because most people see speed training as swinging speed sticks, but that's the very basis of it. So it's like 10% of it. And there's so much more. And I truly believe speed training as such, how it's being viewed oftentimes of, like, for example, when long drivers train for speed, oftentimes they're in the simulator, chasing a number, yelling, loud music, pumping, like all that stuff, like these like caveman type of workouts, right? Hitting golf balls as fast as you can. They're a part of it, 100%. there's a place for it, but there's so much more happening. It's like the iceberg. It's just the tip of the iceberg that people see. And obviously these videos do very well on social media because people don't understand what's going on. And
That's right.
they rewatch it and they're like, this is not golf. Yeah,
That's right.
This is not golf. That is correct. But then they comment, and all these engagements, obviously they drive views too. So that's very interesting, that how the impression of speed training is in the general public. It's very interesting. But I mean, at the same time, with like all these professional golfers like Bryson showcasing that these principles can also be applied to golf, all of a sudden they became more interesting and people want to understand more about it. And that's what I like about this, because like 5 years back, 6 years back, we probably wouldn't have this discussion. It's super, super interesting.
It is.
And what I disagree with is Greg Rose implied in this little snippet that I saw that, well, you're supposed to warm up. I'm talking about the average golfer, right? You're supposed to warm up 15, 20 swings. And then you have, like, I think he said 15 to 20 swings to swing fast, and then you slow down. And from then on, you're actually supposed to stop speed training because you're training slower, and that makes you slower. And that is absolutely against everything that I preach in terms of speed training, because the very basis of speed training for me is mechanics. So we work on all these things that I mentioned before. One example being loading up rather than actually sinking in the backswing to put yourself in a position to unweigh and push off the ground again. All these principles that long drivers utilize in a very extreme way. But they work so great and quickly for us and do so much because we apply them so extreme. A golfer does the same thing, but just not as extreme. Sometimes you can't even see it on video. I mean, you can see a head sinking, which is not very, very effective or very powerful. But at the same time, you can measure it. For example, on force plates, you see the vertical force output and the timing of it. So you could work on it, applying the same principle, but working on making it feasible for golf. I just had a junior golfer in my studio like 2 hours ago, a +4 handicap, and we were working on both the horizontal force in the backswing and the vertical force in the downswing. And I'm actually applying the same stuff that I would do with me, just not as extreme. And I would maybe change the timing a little bit, but the drills and like all that stuff that I do mechanically is pretty much the same thing, but I just try to apply it to golf. Why am I saying all this? This is the very basis of speed training for me, because if you don't have the mechanics right, your speed training is going to be very inefficient. It can work when you do overspeed training, hit stuff, and just try to go all out every single time, swing back longer, and like all these things. Yeah, they can work. They can have an effect. But when you can get the mechanics right before and put yourself in a position to make the new speed you gain through speed training more effective, it is the very baseline to actually start going to make your speed to start with your speed journey. And with this being said, sometimes, oftentimes, always, you benefit from longer training sessions when you try to get the mechanics for speed right and hit a lot of golf balls. If you stop after 20 shots, you sacrifice a lot of training, a lot of practice to get the mechanics right, to get yourself in a position to get faster. Because I see people get faster after shot 60, after shot 100, sometimes after shot 160, sometimes after shot 200. I'm not telling people to train this long, but definitely not to stop once they see their speed drop. Because I actually thought about this for a long time, because I was asking myself the question, why do I see long drivers, especially because they do a lot of this speed training, but also golf professionals or golfers that want to go for speed, peak their speed at shot like 100, 120. Mm-hmm. Why is that the case? It doesn't really make sense from a training standpoint, because a javelin thrower, I mean, javelin throwers out there, correct me, but I doubt that you guys throw your longest at throw 120. I don't think that would happen. So, or like take a squat, right? It's not like the more you squat, the stronger you get. It's just not the case. At some point, you simply get weaker. And in long drive, I didn't experience that. And or in speed training in general, I didn't experience that. So I reached out to a guy called Chris Beardsley, I believe his name is. Yeah, Chris Beardsley. And he's a PhD in physiology, or he was releasing a lot of papers. His Instagram page is phenomenal. So I reached out to him and was like, I want to do a 30-minute consultation with you because I have a couple questions that don't make sense to me. And I explained this scenario to him, and I was like, why is that the case? And now comes the interesting point. Why does that not apply that much to me anymore? Because I don't see myself the fastest at ball 120 or 150 unless I actually prime for it, just like for the World Championship. That's why I do this type of conditioning. What applies to me is in my normal session, my speed drops after around ball 60. But over the last 5 years, and I'm working for speed for 5 years now, I was always faster towards the end of the session. So why did this change? And why do I see so many people getting faster the longer they practice? And he explained the whole thing. He was like, yeah, it actually makes sense. Because on this side, what we have is when you're working in a tracked environment, in a feedback environment, so having a TrackMan, a foresight, a radar system that is tracking your speed, so you're working in an environment with feedback. On this side, you have the coordination. So your mechanics, basically, you're utilizing to get faster. And on this side, you have all your high, fast twitching, super high, hyper fast twitching, whatever they call it, muscle fiber that's responsible to actually doing the motion. This super high twitch muscle fiber is fatiguing fairly quickly. So it would make sense after 30, 40 shots that this is actually going down. So you don't benefit as much from the high, fast twitching muscle fiber anymore. But on this side, you have the coordination, and consciously and subconsciously, you're actually improving your technique, your mechanics to get faster because you see the feedback every single time and you know, like, oh, this was faster, this was slower, this was faster, this was slower. And I see the benefit of the high twitch muscle fiber at some point going down, but at the same time, this is still the gains you get from the coordination side of things is still higher, especially when you're a newbie. So all I preach is you're trying to get faster, start with the mechanics, and do not stop as soon as you see a dip, because that next shot could be, you could learn from your last shot and actually utilize that extra gains from the coordination to get faster on your next shot. So yeah, for sure you fatigue, but it's like, it's this balance act, and the coordination gains you're making, especially in the very beginning, are definitely bigger than the fatigue of the high super fast twitching muscle fiber, central nervous system, whatever might be involved. So I see that a lot. And I differentiate between like classic speed training, just trying to go faster in the gym, hitting the speed sticks, hitting something, like all the speed training with all the drills that we do, and actually working on the mechanics side of things, which is way more powerful. So when you're trying to make a change there, 100% hit more balls, because you're learning. The more balls you hit, you're learning. I'm not saying it's 500, but I'm saying it's definitely more than 20.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, that's well said. There's a lot there, right? There's a lot there, like you were saying, to make that point. I want to transition this now to the mechanics, because this is where I find this very fascinating. And so here is a video that is loading in right now. So let me see. Here we go. So I've watched this video, Martin, probably 100 times.
Oh, really?
I mean, oh yeah. I mean, I just think it's so fascinating, and I've known you, and I've watched a lot of your stuff, obviously, and you compete. But there's so much in here that I teach, and I'm talking to, like a 55-year-old male that plays one day a week. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to get them to turn their head like this, and load up and recruit up as much as this. But I'm saying a lot of the same movements, right? Take my audience here and what they're watching on video here. And for those that are listening, what you're seeing here is a video, and I'll post this on my Instagram as well. But it's this rock and it's like this, the belt buckle, the pelvis kind of moving over to the right, and then it goes back to the left, and now it goes back to the right, and then we turn and really stand up this leg. And I'll let Martin take it from here on how this is beneficial to creating more speed.
Yeah, bottom line is allow yourself to be more athletic. Golf is an athletic sport. Your feet don't have to stay rooted, and actually that could diminish your speed. So what I'm doing is basically I'm rocking back and forth to eventually get on my lead side, press down my lead side to move my entire body to the trail side, loading over and then loading up. So at my head is actually, if you would draw a line over my head before, it would actually cross that line because I'm loading up. Now, these principles are super exaggerated. This is a drill. I'm doing this with a speed stick because I'm just trying to showcase what's happening there.
Right.
And when you look at a lot of professional golfers, you see some of these moves. When you look at Rory, he's loading a little bit into his trail side. When you see DJ, he's loading a little bit into his trail side. When you see Henrik Stenson, he's been doing it for years in a very different way. So the idea about this is we create, in long drive, we do it to a very extreme extent, but we create trigger moves. So we're actually creating some type of motion to eventually push into our lead side and move our body over to the trail side. So we're trying to trigger the swing, the takeaway of the swing. And what you see as well is the body is actually moving to the trail side before we take away the club.
Yes.
So there's a bottom line is there's a lot of motion going on before the swing actually starts, before the head actually moves. So then the more I do this, the more speed or the more flow, the more motion, the more dynamic I can create my long drive swing, because I have a way easier time for the rest of the long drive elements as well. Now here, I actually stop my swing at, like, you would probably call it P4, right? For me, it's not yet quite P4, but I would, like, with a long drive swing, when I would swing back like crazy, I would actually have a way easier time to swing back that long, right, and turn my shoulders almost 130, 140 degrees, because I take like my takeaway is so powerful with authority, so swift. I love to call it swift, that I have a way easier time to load up all these different segments as well as the T-spine to rotate. If I would do that slowly and very statically, it would be so hard to actually turn that long. So there's a lot of stuff happening. And these videos, I do not post these videos to encourage people to do this out on the golf course. Absolutely not. I want to showcase this is the principles that we use. These principles work. Yeah. And you can use these too. But, well, if you do a drill like this and do it this much, that's cool. When you go and grab a club afterwards and just try to hit your normal golf shot, if it's only going to transfer this much to your golf swing, it's already awesome. You probably already see speed gains.
Well, I've made the statement many times. I'm lengthening people out more than I'm shortening them up. So when I look at this and I think to my students that I have in the studio and have taught for years, a couple things. One is that belt buckle kind of tracing over to the right side a little bit. This left knee releasing a little bit more behind the ball. This right, I kind of call it this elongation up. Like the trail sides getting longer, the spine's kind of opening up and extending. And it feels like, to the student, it feels like they are getting taller. They are elongating up. And oftentimes, Martin, even though you are getting taller and your head's moving up, they don't. They feel like they are, but they don't.
Stay level.
And they're like, "Oh my God, my head stayed how?" And it's because, well, you're staying down. Like, you know, like their mind is that you're trying to keep your spine down in flexion and trying to, you know, turn more of the upper than the lower, and their spine's moving off the ball. And I call it the old man swing. It's kind of moving down that path. And it's like, whoa, stop. We got to lengthen you out. We got to lengthen you out. We got to get you more dynamic with your legs, your hips, your pelvis, your spine. Lengthen this thing out. And they're like, my gosh, I feel like I'm up here and I'm up here. And then they look at it and they're like, damn, that looks good. I don't think I've ever had the club there in my life. You know, it looks really, really good. Now, they feel a little wild.
Yeah.
Right? They feel a little wild. They feel a little out of control. But what's very interesting is as they break through that internal governor and they chip away at it and they move it, to your point, just this much, they really don't hit it that much worse. I mean, they may like a few, but they find it pretty quickly. And I find it, right? This is me too. Look, Martin, when I say that my student, this is me too. Like I kind of, when I was a young player, I was in this turn the upper, not the lower. And I'm like, I'm 6'4" and I don't hit it nearly as far as I should, you know? And now I look at my swing, I'm using my legs. I'm winding up, I'm trying to stand up, get taller, lengthen this thing out, give it more time to put force on it. And, so I've gotten longer as I've gotten older, off the tee, just through these principles. I just love this video. I think it's so cool. And I share it with people. Now let's go to this one. Okay. Now watch this. This one's going to come up and loading in here. This one's going to be more about downswing, where I love this little, like this, it almost looks like this little kind of snap, you know, where you kind of push down into the ground. Here we go. You kind of push down and then you pop back up out of it, right? What's happening there into the ground there on the downswing?
Yeah, it's super interesting because just before, so the idea about this whole thing is we're moving up, right, to actually prepare the push off the ground. So it's a little bit comparable to jumping up a table. If I wanted to jump up this table, I could do it two ways, right? I could just squat down and then try to jump up, or I could actually implement this little counter move up, then down, and then jump up. It is the same principle. So with the upload move, with this motion, the counter motion that I do upwards, I'm actually preparing a more powerful push off the ground. Because before we actually push off the ground, we're losing a lot of our body weight. So in transition, what I see sometimes, like I've seen long drivers at like 25%, but usually half is already a lot. So when you weigh 50% of your body weight, it's already a lot, because from that valley, you have a way easier time to spike that vertical force off the ground, because you're in a position to actually almost, we call it unweighting, right? So almost like drop down and push off the ground quickly. So I also try to simulate this when I'm working on jumping, for example, right? So I like a lot of these plyometric jumps when you basically try to keep the time on the ground as short as possible. So I try to drop down and just jump up as quickly as I can, right? To get the timing right on that. And the bottom line about all of this is it's not really for the up, down, and up motion. It's not really about how deep you squat down, but how quickly. It's really this like upload motion, then down up. That's really what it's about. And well, the more efficient you can do that, the more potential you have for efficient dynamics.
And that's referred to as unweighting the lead foot, right?
Yeah. I mean, eventually it's everything, right? But the lead foot is going to unweigh a lot more than trail foot, right? Because most of your weight is distributed to the right side still.
Right.
But also with this right shift, right? I mean, shifting right, just like I showed before in the video, and then just staying right and just trying to rotate through is not very powerful. So actually with this uploading and loading to the right move, what we do as well is what you see from long drivers often at P2 already or earlier. So my recentering, that's what I'm talking about. So going back to the center with my pelvis, especially for me, already starts at like before I actually take away the club. When I look at the pressure trace, it's very interesting. So I'm loading, and then before the club head moves, my pressure is already shifting over. It's very, very, very
Wow.
interesting. And I just like all this stuff. I didn't really, to me, it feels way later, but I just, undisclosed all of this. I could show it, or I know it because I have a force plate now that I can play around with. I can see all these things. But yeah, it's eventually it's an unweighting of the left foot. Then oftentimes what you see is the left heel for long drivers coming up the ground, because then you can even gain more height, right? You can get a little taller. Also, it helps you to open up that pelvis a little bit, so you can rotate more. Then you can rotate your shoulders more. I mean, this is a typical long drive move, how extremely they do it. But also sometimes, these moves like that left heel off the ground, for a senior player who's not that flexible, might help him a little bit to find a better position, right? You never know. It depends on the player. But the whole thing, like the super extreme upload, then almost like falling down, we're moving quicker than gravity would pull us, right? So we move down and then again up. That's really, you see that a lot on the long drive tour, because one byproduct of that then is that flying left foot oftentimes, right? You see that, so it flies backwards.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. That's where that comes from, right? Is that unweighting of that left foot, like down and then back off of it, and as you explode with that amount of speed off of it, like that left leg's giving way and wants to kind of like open up as a door, right? Like it flies away, and it's amazing to me how
it's a byproduct.
The byproduct, it's amazing to me how far your guys' lead leg will swing open like a door, and how, I mean, it's like you watch that and you're like, oh, holy shit, that guy hit the ball too. Like, I mean, it's one of those that it's a weird look, but I mean, I get it when the way you're explaining it and what's happening there. But for like, I think for an amateur, and they're listening to this in my audience, and I promise there's pieces in here that I teach every single day. I promise to everybody, like, they're part of the training programs and this and that, maybe not to the extreme. And we're not asking you to try to hit it 400 yards, but this way you load up, and particularly maybe not so much just floating and pushing back so dynamically, but my point is that where I was going with this is that when you start opening these players up, and you start getting them to recruit better. I use the word recruit. I don't know if that's the right word, but you're kind of going into it the right way to try to recruit more. And the backswing just allows them more time coming down to get the club in a better spot. They got more time to do what they want through the impact. I'm like, it just all gets better, like everything just starts getting better and better and better. Speed goes up. I think they gain more control. And I think in many ways, it's kind of where power and accuracy kind of come together in this recruitment going back, So it's like, gosh, I don't want to get super wild doing this. Like, through my experience, most don't. They don't get wild. Now, can you get wild if you get really crazy in this? Yeah, sure, you could. But if you go down this path of recruitment, breaking through the governor, and then okay, I'm going to take this, and that's kind of my play mode. In fact, I think most get more accurate.
I agree, 100%. So, I mean, I can tell from my own experience, when I try to freeze over the ball and I try to hit it in the fairway, then it's getting wild. Then the ball is actually going wild. I mean, there's so many aspects to it, as well as a mental aspect, right? When you just, excuse me, don't give a shit, and you just address the golf ball and you just whack it, right? You most of the time I make good contact, right? And as soon as I stand there and I start to think about like guide this and guide that, and it's something's off in that moment in time. So I've seen that too. Like people free them up, make them more athletic, especially when they have an athletic background. So there's this 50-year-old who played basketball his whole life. He's used to actually interacting with the ground, jumping off the ground, getting rebounds and all that, right? And moving in the right direction, turning sometimes like rotationally, especially they're lacking a little bit of separation because they don't really have to do it in their sport. But it is so interesting how quickly people gain stuff like that when they're, connecting an old motion with the golf swing. And wow, I'm allowed to do this. Yeah, you are. Absolutely. Go get that rebound, right? Go jump. In basketball, you can't take your time on the ground, because when you don't jump up, you don't get that freaking rebound. So you go down, up, and jump as well. let's say, put as much force in the ground as you can. In basketball, you want to jump as high as you can, but in golf, you actually want to apply as much force in the ground as you can to speed up the gear, right? Because I love talking about my thorax as a gear with that visual. So that's actually rotating, right? I mean, it's rotating this way. So I'm going like this, and I can actually use my foot and my leg to lock into that gear and spin it. Right. I love the idea about that. And a lot of people, they're like, oh, wow, I've never thought about it this way, but that's a pretty cool explanation. And now do the same thing with my basketball background and, put as much force in the ground as possible. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, cool, I'm allowed to do this. And they're not only striping it more, but at the same time, it's a different sport all of a sudden because they're allowed to do something that is athletic and they're not being forced to keep their feet rooted and all of that. I'm not saying it's impossible to play golf like that. I would never, ever teach anyone to do these principles when they don't want to. When they're like, yeah, I'm okay with my speed and I want to play golf like this, that's perfectly fine. Then go do that. That's cool. But if you want to gain speed and you want to allow yourself to be more athletic, go give it a shot. I mean, there's so many ways to play golf, and it's so interesting how long drive and distance in general and speed was doomed for so long.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden, a few players show that it's actually also a cool way to play golf. And it's actually possible to control the ball at these speeds and all the advantages that come with it. And then there's, as I said, Francesco, who's also utilizing the same stuff, but at a different level.
Yep.
And there's just a million ways to play golf, and this is one of them. And all of a sudden, people realize it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool from Molinari. I didn't know that. I would, if there's two names that I would throw out there, I would Matt Kuchar reminds me of myself so much. Same frame. I mean, the dude hits it nowhere for his frame, like 284 off the tee, right? And it's like, my God, dude, that guy could hit. That guy in a week could put 15 to 20 yards on. I mean, just by changing his technique and getting him fired up and like, okay, now he might get a little more accurate, a little more inaccurate. Who knows? Maybe not. I feel like he's one that I've always felt, okay, he needs to go down that path. I'd love to see Kuchar like just get crazy and take on some more speed training. And I would even throw Joel Damon in there. That's another one who I know. And I'd love to see him go down this path. And look, it's transitioning to the PGA Tour discussion, which we have a lot of these players on too. You know, it's sensitive. They got to be careful. And I get that, you know, some have tried to go down that path, maybe the wrong way, and it kind of set them back. But, you know, we see a lot of good examples. Matthew Fitzpatrick is doing a nice job with some of his speed training in that net effect. Like I said, you can't argue with what Bryson did and through that run and how much better of a player that it made him. So it's a fascinating time and discussion in this speed era, as we put it. I put it. We are in the speed era, and no one creates more speed than you, Martin. I appreciate your time, man. Coming on, we'll do this again. We're gonna do this again because I've got some other ideas that I want to have some fun with. So if you're willing, we'll have you back on here like in the spring or the summer, and we'll keep going down this path.
100%. If you're at the PGA show, let's hook up.
I am. Yeah. I'll be at the PGA show. Done. I'll see you next week in Orlando.
That's awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Travis. I appreciate it.
Long drive world champ 2022. Thank you, man. This was great.
Thank you.
Coffee Company was established in 2021 to create the best coffee to fuel the underdogs who perseveres, who hustles, and have the give-it-all mentality to achieve their American dream. Haymaker Coffee, only roast top quality, specialty grade coffee beans, resulting in brews that satisfies those who demand every drop from their coffee and day. If you work hard, run hard, fight hard, and play hard, we have your coffee right here.